I don't know what's more confusing, learning astrology or just being a human. Moonday Musings is here to help with that. A weekly, no bullshit guide for the upcoming cosmic forecast and how you can actually use this in your real life. Hello, my wonderful neighbor. Happy Monday. Happy Moonday, my friend, and welcome to Moonday Musings. I'm Danny Wright, that witch next door, your friendly neighborhood astrology and witchcraft mentor. And just like that, folks, Aries season is basically here and March is essentially over. Just kidding. But Aries season is on its way. We have the Spring Equinox this year. This week in a couple of days. And I will say that Aries energy just feels like it definitely hits the ground running. It really, really does. So that's why once the Spring Equinox hits, I swear, I'm just like, okay, March is done. So we have the Spring Equinox, the start of Aries season, and also this marks our next celebration on the neo-pagan wheel of the year, Ostara. This year, if you don't already know, this year for each of the sabbats, I will be utilizing that week's Moonday episode to dive a little bit deeper into the significance of the celebration itself. I also want to get into the background on this a little bit and a little bit into the history, but also some ways that you can work with the energy itself and how you in your modern and unique witchcraft practice can celebrate yourself. So first, I just want to say, if you don't really resonate with the pagan wheel of the year, sometimes the wheel of the year is attributed specifically to the Wicca religion or tradition only. And actually, I would extend the wheel of the year to the much broader umbrella that is neo-paganism. These holidays, these celebrations are rooted and inspired by ancient festivals and celebrations. Where a big mistake and misconception happens, this definitely happened for me when I was when I very first stepped into paganism and witchcraft. So don't worry at all if this is you, but I just took them at such face value that, this was, Ostara was this ancient celebration that we've been celebrating for thousands and thousands of years. Well, of course not. These festivals and celebrations, think about all that has transpired from the ancient ancestors. A lot of these celebrations are inspired by and rooted from. And today, how much has taken place between then and now? How much has been lost in translation? How much is left up to our own speculation and interpretation based on historical, archaeological findings, different historical documents that, again, some are not so straightforward. We're definitely going to hit on a lot of this today for Ostara. And this is a really beautiful example of where a lot of these celebrations came from in the neo-pagan, which just means the modern pagan, wheel of the year. A lot of these celebrations are pieced together from different cultures, different traditions around the world throughout different periods of time, honestly. And if you don't really resonate with the wheel of the year itself, that is okay. First of all, the wheel is structured around our seasons that we experience. The wheel, the essence in and of itself of the wheel of the year is really about working with the natural energy of the earth around you, wherever that is for you. we can really broaden our perspective when it comes to the wheel of the year and each of these celebrations, and really see them and embrace them in a way that works so uniquely and aligned for each of us in our paths and our practices that honor the inspiration and the roots of a lot of these celebrations and where these things come from, that also honor and hold space for what, like I said, for what has transpired from then to now. And all that has happened and how different these celebrations, of course, look today. The problems that we encounter today are so different than the challenges and the problems of our most ancient ancestors. So of course, the way we celebrate a festival or a holiday is going to look very, very different. So just go into each of these episodes, and I'll always remind you of this as we go into them, but you'll see, especially with Ostara, it's a really beautiful example of all of this. When we get into the history here, this is really about the spring equinox. And again, the natural season and the way that looks in Earth's energy around you, wherever you live during the equinox. Now, this is I messed up. This is specifically in regards to the northern hemisphere, of course, because in the southern hemisphere, the wheel of the year progression is the same, but each of the celebrations are opposite because our seasons are opposite one another. So right now in the northern hemisphere, we're preparing to celebrate Ostara, and everyone in the southern hemisphere will be celebrating Mabon. So happy Mabon and Mabon blessings to all of our pals, all of our neighbors in the southern hemisphere, by the way. So keep that in mind. Your locale, your own geography plays a role in the wheel of the year itself, because your locality plays a major role in Earth energy, which again is the essence and core of the wheel of the year itself. So let's get into Ostara here. First and foremost, like I said, Ostara is marked by the spring equinox. This is the start of Aries season, meaning the sun is moving into the sign of Aries. And at that moment, that is what marks the spring equinox. So this is very similar to winter solstice, or what we also call Yule, and we'll get there obviously later this year, is marked by when the sun moves into Capricorn. Okay, so I'll give you that astrological connection as well. So this year, the start of Aries season, the sun moves into the sign of Aries at 11:06 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Tuesday, March 19th. This year, if you already listened to last week's Moonday, then you know that during the equinox, Venus is going to still be in Pisces. And I think it is so beautiful and poetic that during the spring equinox this year, Venus is exalted in Pisces. And if you want to know more about that Venus and Pisces exaltation, and you didn't already listen to last week, again, make sure you go back and listen to that. So let's talk a little bit about where Ostara came from. When I was starting out as a witch and a pagan, and I researched Ostara, I came upon many articles, and honestly, this happened when I was doing fresh research for the episode as well. I was a little concerned at the amount of articles, blog articles that I came across that just so confidently and definitively said, this is Ostara. It's based on this ancient Germanic goddess. This is where Easter came from directly, was from this goddess's name. All of this is just said and really rattled off. And if you've done any looking into Ostara yourself, you might be and you don't know any deeper history behind any of that, you might think, yeah, isn't that what? No, it's actually not. That's actually not very accurate. I'm going to get into a lot more of the actual specifics behind the background, but this is a really golden opportunity to share and talk about why it's so important you do your research and why so much of witchcraft and spiritual practice is a sacred study practice. It's so true. I really, if it's something that I continue learning more and more and more as I continue to go on, yes, of course, you need to like do the magic and like be very hands-on about your practice as well. I don't mean like get stuck in the books and never do anything else, but I do think that very sacred and intentional study and research behind the different rituals and practices that you are getting inspiration from other people, or adapting from other people, or joining in and participating with other people. It's really important you do your own research before you just kind of run blindly into it. And again, if you have, you're not alone. Like, this is exactly how I started out as a new pagan and a new witch. And I read a lot of those blog articles. I did take a lot of them at face value. I probably gave a lot of people borderline full on misinformation because I was being misinformed and it was because I was taking all of these articles at face value. It's hard sometimes in witchcraft because there's no rules. It's kind of the Wild West out here, you know, where a lot of us are going on the honor code and, you know, the research that we do and the way we present our information. And there are definitely people that crank out blog articles, especially these days, I'll just be honest, especially using like ChatGPT and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with using AI. I'm actually not one of those very anti-AI people. But you'll see that people are now like powering out articles and like blog posts. And if ChatGPT, for example, if you asked it to write an article about Ostara from a witchcraft perspective or for witches, it could, I haven't tested it personally, but it could very well generate something very similar because it's so prevalent on the internet that's actually very, very inaccurate. So you want to do some digging. You want to look into why. How do we know that it's this ancient Germanic goddess? People that write these articles should link their sources. And so what I did, I'm going to read you all a passage from my favorite book for working with seasonal magic right now. Like, I have so many different, there's so many seasonal, great seasonal and Wheel of the Year books out there. But right now in particular, the last year or two, I've been really loving The Hearth Witch's Year by Anna Franklin. It's already linked in the show notes, of course. What I did was I read a few different articles online and in books that I already have, and then I went and fact checked. And this is how I was able to find what I felt was the most accurate, but still concise and kind of summed up background of Ostara for you. And I found that Anna Franklin's passage about it, about the vernal equinox and the name of Ostara and where it came from in the Hearth Witch's Year, I found that she did an excellent job of doing that same process of very intentional sacred study. She included her resources in her book as well. And I looked at hers, and I also looked into my own resources and was able to confirm the same thing multiple times. But the way she words it is really, really helpful and very, very informative. And so I am going to read you this passage out of the Hearth Witch's Year about where the term and name Ostara came from. And disclaimer, there's a couple words in here, old words, that I'm going to do my best to pronounce. And don't laugh at me or be mean to me about it, because I'm really just trying to do my best. Feel free to correct me nicely. Okay. So nowadays, most modern pagans call the spring equinox Ostara. It was given this name in the 1970s by the writer Aidan Kelly, who explained that, and here she is quoting an Aidan Kelly blog article that was written. We have Gaelic names for the 4 Celtic holidays. It offended my aesthetic sensibilities that there seemed to be no pagan names for the summer solstice or the fall equinox equivalent to Yule or Beltane, so I decided to supply them. The spring equinox was almost a non-issue. The Venerable Bede says that it was sacred to a Saxon goddess, Ostara or Eostre, from whom we get the name Easter. And that's end quote. And now back into the general passage of the book here. She says, we actually know nothing about the goddess Eostre. There is only one reference to her in early literature, and this is by the 7th/8th century English monk Venerable Bede in his De Temporum Ratione, or The Reckoning of Time. He wrote that during Eosternmonth, the lunar month of March or April, pagan Anglo-Saxons had once held feasts in Eostre's honor, but the tradition had died out by his time. Based on this single source, and I'm going to pause here really quick. I looked this up. I looked up The Reckoning of Time and looked up the quote, and I checked it on multiple sources, different articles that also quote this same writing. This is true. And people that try to, anybody that explores the history of Easter or Ostara, and whether they're for or against one or the other, or about where it comes from, pretty much everybody goes back and quotes this one small mention in this Reckoning of Time document that Venerable Bede wrote. He was an English monk, and I just wanted, this is the only context that Anna Franklin in this book, The Hearth Witch's Year, didn't give context, that I had to kind of go digging for myself. This monks, in many ways, a lot of their duties, and especially for Venerable Bede, he was a historian, and he documented so much history, and we get a lot of our interpretation, or we infer a lot of information from a lot of his texts and others that were like him that documented like that. So that's where that came from. That's what they're talking about. There is literally one mention of the goddess name Eostre, which is spelled Eostre. So if you look up Ostara, you are going to see this name. And you're probably going to see somebody say multiple times, oh, this is where the name Easter came from, and this is where Ostara came from. That is 100% inferred technically, because literally the only written reference that we have been able to find on goddess Eostre is this one mention that Bede put in his Reckoning of Time document. He basically just says, she summarizes it here. All he wrote was that during that lunar month of March, April, that the pagan Anglo-Saxons had once held feasts in this goddess's honor, but that tradition had already died out by his time. They already were not practicing that tradition anymore. She was basically already considered an ancient and previously worshipped goddess at that time. Some people infer that Eostre may have been a deity that was worshipped by tribes of that region, and not necessarily larger communities where we would have found more actual written documentation about this goddess, and perhaps that she was worshipped by people that weren't able to, or at the time weren't writing down and documenting their history with the written word, okay? So just to give you that background, it's really, really important, okay? So the tradition of worshiping Yastar had died out by Bede's time. Based on this single source, folklorist and recorder of fairy tales Jacob Grimm attempted to reconstruct a possible Germanic equivalent goddess, calling her Ostara, arguing that since Germans called April Ostarmanoth, while most countries retained the biblical Pascha for Easter, the word must relate to austral, from the Old High German adverb ostar, which means expresses movement towards the rising sun, concluding that the putative deity would have been a goddess of dawn. So where Ostara as a goddess comes from was something created by Jacob Grimm based on his own findings and research, basically. Given the lack of any direct evidence for Ostara or Yastar, scholars have dismissed the goddess as a pure invention of Bede. So this is where, like I said, depending on where you look on the internet, some people say that Bede, writing that about Yastar and his reckoning of time, some scholars say he straight up made her up. But this is honestly very unlikely given what Bede did for a living, and he took his work very seriously and very sacredly, which is why more other people interpret this was he really probably did hear of Yastar being a deity that was worshipped, and the fact that we don't find any other evidence of that goddess being worshipped could mean that it came from tribal people of that region. Okay, this is ancient England. Okay. Scholars have dismissed the goddess as a pure invention of Bede, concluding that the Old English word Easter is simply an approximation of the Latin word albe, which means white, a word sometimes applied to Easter. It has to be said that it doesn't mean the goddess Yastar or Ostara didn't exist. It's unlikely that Bede made her up. But we have one very brief mention of her name, and Jacob Grimm made a connection between her name and the word for east, the direction of the rising sun. We certainly know nothing at all about her worship, and there's most definitely no mention of hares and eggs as cult symbols, as I sometimes read. And I found the same thing in my own research as Anna Franklin. It was very mixed on finding symbols for hares and eggs in ancient occult practice. Neither is there a linguistic connection with the Latin word ostrus, which relating to ovulation and eggs, nor with the Middle Eastern goddesses Ishtar and Astarte, which I also found when I was researching. A lot of people just straight up said, oh, Yastar was the ancient goddess Ishtar. And there's no evidence connecting them at all. Nevertheless, the name Ostara resonates with modern pagans. And as long as we don't make up fake histories for it, we can happily call the vernal equinox Ostara if we wish. Our ancestors certainly celebrated the spring equinox, whatever they called it. Okay, that's the end of what I'll read out of the Hearth Witch's Year. But as you can see, and I wanted to really be able to go into detail for you here on the history, because I wanted you to see the process of evolution over time. It's just like that old game telephone that we all played in elementary school, and how much the message changes by the time it gets to the very end of the circle. You know what I mean? Back to the starting point. So this is really, really important before you just go spouting off, this is where this came from, this is what it means, to know if that is accurate or not. And that does require some digging. I mean, I spent an hour or two digging into this. And keep in mind, I was being particularly thorough since I was planning to record a podcast episode around it. But this is still a good example of what I would do on a personal level anyways, before fully participating in something, before I feel like I have any kind of actual grasp on it or where it potentially came from. I just personally really love how in that book, Anna Franklin in that passage ends it with, because I completely agree, our ancestors certainly celebrated the spring equinox, whatever they called it. So this is why, it's all about getting seasonal. Think about when it comes to spring equinox, when it comes to Ostara, think about what screams spring to you in your neck of the woods. So lots of things that are associated with Ostara and spring, a lot of the different symbols and correspondences would be things like seeds, any kind of little sprouts, baby animals, of course, buds and newly blossomed flowers, young or baby veggies. So anything that's harvested early, like baby spinach, baby corn, spring onions, any kind of microgreens, all of those are spring veggies harvested nice and early while the plant is very, very young. This is actually why pale and muted colors or pastels are often associated with spring, and the more saturated and bright colors are associated with summer, right? When the sun is highest in the sky, summer and midsummer represents kind of our full moon phase of the year. The equinox is our quarter moon of the year. If we equate the wheel of the year to a full lunar cycle, this is the first quarter phase. So the light illuminating the moon is growing, and we're making our way to that peak full illuminated energy that is full moon / midsummer, okay? So, of course, regardless of which came first, the Easter bunny or the egg, or Easter or Ostara or Yost or whatever, eggs and rabbits in our modern sense are very much associated with spring equinox. Again, the origin of the Easter bunny alone, talk about, pun intended, a rabbit hole to go down. The Easter bunny is a highly debated topic. Oh my God, I started really falling down the internet hole on that one. And I had to pull myself out. I was like, focus on Ostara. Like, we do not need to give a detailed explanation of where the Easter bunny came from, but it is very highly, highly debated. Again, we have to do a lot of inferring based on the evidence historically that we do have. Either way, from a seasonal perspective, both eggs and rabbits or hares make a ton of sense why they would be associated with the spring equinox. The springtime is when we start seeing the rabbits the most. They come out of hibernation. They get freaking busy with it. And so they populate. Eggs, obviously, we see all of the birds migrating and coming back and giving birth to their young. So eggs are so abundant, and eggs have been revered as sacred objects, and the shape itself of an egg has been revered as a sacred object for a very, very, very long time. Again, the connection to the Easter bunny and eggs, highly, highly debated. You can go down that rabbit hole if you'd like. Go down the Easter rabbit hole. All right, so here are my ideas for how you can work with the spring equinox or celebrate Ostara, whatever you'd like to call it and refer to it for yourself. But first and foremost, let me just throw this out there. Of course, please feel free to repurpose Easter decorations. When I was just starting out, I thought there was something so wrong with doing that. There's a lot in beginner witchcraft when you enter into the beginning of paganism and becoming a new witch. There's a lot of very anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, rhetoric that you will inevitably come across. I understand where this comes from, and the problem is that it leads to practicing your magic and your spirituality in a way that feels like you should, instead of a way that feels intuitive and natural and aligned for you. And if you are like me and you kind of have like a mixed up background when it comes to religion and spirituality, I was certainly not raised to be a witch and a pagan. I technically was raised Catholic, but both of my parents were in the middle of their own reckoning when it came to religion. I mean, both of them were in their own massive transition, reevaluation of how they saw religion, what purpose did they think that it served. I mean, both of them, you definitely have some major religious trauma that resulted in plenty of detachment from the church and anything to do with Christian or Catholic faith. But at the same time, especially my mom's mom, my grandma, whom we were very, very close with, she was a very religious person. And so out of respect and love for her, there was still a lot of participation in Catholicism for me when I was a kid. So I got my first communion. I went to Sunday school. I do have some of that classical religious background, but again, I was pretty young. I would say 5th, 6th, 7th grade, when my parents by that point were very like, I don't know. Like, I don't really know how I feel about this. I don't necessarily resonate with it. And actually started exploring like different spiritualities anyway at that time. Both my parents began studying different Eastern philosophy and practices and religions and things like that. So again, I had a very eclectic background with spirituality and religion, but I do have some of those very classic traditional traditions and childhood nostalgia and the things that I associated with Easter. When I had my daughter, I felt all mixed up about that at first. And I was like, I don't really resonate with Easter as far as the Christian biblical story goes of Christ rising from the dead after 3 days. I do resonate with the concept of rebirth this time of year, very, very much. But I associate that so strongly with the equinox, and Easter does not almost ever coincide with the actual equinox, because Easter is determined by, a certain Sunday, and it has to take Lent into consideration and all of that. For the equinox, it's marked by the beginning of Aries season, of the sun moving into Aries. And because I resonate so much stronger with astrology, the equinox resonates with me. But my daughter, in some ways similar to me, she also has family members that do celebrate Easter and want to do the Easter thing with her and the Easter egg hunt. And the Easter bunny brings a basket and stuff. So we technically do, if this helps anybody hearing this, we do technically do a little Easter thing for her. We'll get her a little Easter basket this year. I personally put more effort and make a more special day out of the equinox. And we talk about what the equinox is. And we usually go outside and we do something with nature, whether it's a craft or something, or if it's something that we can physically do if it's warm enough outside. We're from Colorado, so it's always been kind of hit and miss at that time of year. And anything to do with plants, whether it's even just going and buying a couple packets of seeds or starting to plan out what we want to do for our garden, different things like that. So you can definitely continue celebrating or participating in Easter, first of all, if you want to, if it resonates with you. And you don't have to answer anything else beyond that. You can or the spring equinox. It's very similar to if you want to call it Ostara or not. If you don't want to refer to it as Ostara, that's okay too. If you're like, that just doesn't resonate really with me, but the fact that it's the spring equinox very much does, then go for it. I want to give you all the information and let you practice and incorporate the Earth's natural energy around you in your locality at that time in a way that fits for you and feels aligned for you. Again, I'm going to say it a million times. That is the essence of the wheel of the year itself. So some of my favorite ideas and things that I like to do for Ostara / the spring equinox, make bird feeders is such a fun one. There's so many ways to make safe bird feeders. There are a lot of ways to make unsafe ones. So make sure that you are getting the craft idea from someone that clearly like understands that. You also want to do local research if there are certain types of birds, because you can definitely go to a local plant nursery. A lot of them will have bird feeders and bird seed specifically for the local species around your community, which can be really, really fun and really, really cool. This is a great one to do if you have kiddos or just other people that live with you. Can be a really fun thing to put a bird feeder in a fun place and see all of your little visitors. Another one is plant seeds indoors, like starters specifically, or bulbs, and anything that's frost safe can actually get planted outdoor depending on where you live. Of course, you need to check your zone and where you live and what time of the year and what season it's recommended for that particular plant or seeds or bulbs to be planted in your zone. And that's very easy. That's a Google away if you don't already know that. And every seed packet and pretty much every plant that you buy will tell you right there on the package or labeling, or is another very simple Google search away with the name of the plant and when to plant it outside or when to move it outdoors or whatever. If coming from Colorado, where the weather is so incredibly hit or miss this time of year, and I don't know, this is my first year in New England, so I have no idea if this is normal or not weather. It seems normal to me, but I have no idea. Coming from Colorado, or if you're in a location where you have no idea what the weather's going to be, it's really nice to do spring nature type activities indoors. It's a really wonderful way to feel like you're participating in that life-giving rebirth of spring, even if you can't physically spend a lot of time outside that day. You can also just get yourself a new house plant. And if you are someone that needs help in that arena, I personally like to search on the internet indoor plants that are easy to keep alive. When it comes to Ostara and the spring equinox, baking is very, very popular. There are tons of recipes out there, both in the witchy and pagan community and honestly outside of it, because any recipe website, food magazine, blog, whatever, where you like to get even the big titles where you like to get a lot of your recipes from, like Food Network, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, Tasty, like all of the most big food brands and titles like that churn out recipes like that, they already usually work off of seasonal foods and seasonal cooking and preparation. And so that can be a really easy way to incorporate baking or cooking into your cooking. Look up spring recipes. They don't have to come from a metaphysical website. They can come from some of your favorite, different YouTube channels or whatever, that just use, again, fresh ingredients that are quintessential to springtime. Another really common, cute, adorable, wonderful thing to do is incorporate edible flowers into your cooking and your food, whether that's in salads or on your baked goods. But you can also just incorporate symbols that are both powerful and pretty. So you can, if you have a way to like paint or draw little flowers or blooms onto your food, or even just use plates or napkins that are pretty, that have kind of florals or plants on them, or tablecloth or napkins that have that print, anything like that. Even just going and picking up a fresh spring bouquet from your local market or grocery store, or if you live somewhere where you can ethically forage like a beautiful spring bouquet and just put some fresh blooms in the kitchen while you're preparing any meal for yourself that day. All of that is beautiful Ostara kitchen magic. Eggshells. Anything you could do with eggshells is a wonderful way to work with spring energy, Ostara, equinox energy. There are different little like crafts, especially like beautiful spiritual little witchy crafts that you can look up online if you want to look up, DIY eggshell crafts, or just look up Ostara egg ideas or egg DIY. There's a lot of really unique and pretty and natural ways to dye eggs, which can be like a witchy little riff on a childhood favorite pastime. But one of my favorite things to do with eggshells is to start saving them up if it's been a while, if I don't already have some eggshell powder. And in brujeria, eggshells are ground up to make cascarilla powder, and it is used for divination. You can also use eggshell powder in an even more general sense by sprinkling it into your incense, into your floor wash, into any herbal mix, you're sprinkling outside of your doorway, or if you're keeping a little dish of salt for protection in a certain area of your home. Having some ground up eggshells, little eggshell powder, just like sprinkle here and there. I use eggshell powder very similar to the way that I use salt, except that eggshells not only bring that beautiful protection and cleansing, but also abundance because of the representation of fertility and birth and rebirth and life-giving, okay? So eggshells, whether it's dyeing actual eggs or repurposing the shells themselves, look into using eggshells for Ostara or Spring Equinox. But also, try something new. Start something new or try something new. This is very quintessential Aries energy, very quintessential to the Spring Equinox. Do something that feels adventurous. Also, anything to do with balance, anything that has to do with harmonizing, balancing, meeting something halfway, offering a little counter to balance something out. All of this has to do and is a beautiful way with honoring the equinox, because during the equinox is when the length of the day is equal to the length of night, just like at the fall equinox. So both the autumn equinox and the spring equinox, there is this running beautiful theme of balance of light and dark running all throughout that energy. And finally, celebrating light, aka the return of the sun. So this can be a really beautiful time to like throw open the shades. If you can work in a sunny window, or just if you are doing some meditating that day, meditate with really bright lights all around you that you visualize. This is a really, you can even just visualize the sun's light and energy around you, that warmth. That's a wonderful way to connect with and work with the energy of Ostara or the spring equinox. So just remember, neighbor, when it comes to celebrating the sabbats, start with your history research first. You can explore your own lineage and the connections that your ancestors had to the seasons or the environment around them. Or like I said, you can also focus simply on the season in your immediate environment if you're not necessarily drawn to lineage work. Ultimately, the earth magic that is already happening all around you, this is the essence of honoring the wheel of the year. All right, my friends, don't forget our astrology study club this month is coming up this weekend on March 24th. If you are debating joining us, we would love to have you. This is an awesome opportunity to hang out with me and some other really awesome people and talk about our birth charts. We're going to specifically dive into the full moon eclipse that is on March 25th, and we're going to talk about that eclipse in our birth charts. So if that's something that sounds fun and interesting to you, this is something that is included for my full-time students in that witch school already, but anyone else that's not in that witch school who would also like to join us, tickets are just $35. And you can get those in the show notes below. All you need to do is bring your birth chart, something to take notes, and a little maybe yummy drink for you to sip on. But I can't wait to see you there, and I can't wait to hang out with you. Any details and links are in the show notes below, and feel free to reach out to me, of course, with any questions that you have. All right, my friend, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Moonday Musings, all about Ostara. I will see you next time, and until then, make sure you stay safe, have fun, and of course, stay magical out there. What is that witch school? Well, it's kind of my twist on Patreon. See, for as little as $5 a month, you can get instant access to our entire back catalog of incredible bonus content, like bonus episodes, witchy lessons, a ton of astrology resources, guest teachings, and so much more. But I didn't want to just keep the magic going in between episodes with bonus content. I wanted to keep the learning going, and I wanted to keep the community going. So I also offered tiers that opened up opportunity for continued intentional, magical academic learning, as well as opportunity for creating community with like-minded witchy individuals. For just $30 a month, you can get full, complete access to everything inside that witch school, including our exclusive members-only social media platform on Mighty Networks, where right now, witches and energy practitioners and students just like you are all learning, working together, sharing together, and supporting each other week in and week out. We talk about the show, we share dreams that we've had, we share each other's tarot readings, and ultimately, we support each other as magical beings in a very anti-magical world. You can join us today at thatwitchnextdoor.com/enroll to learn more and start your enrollment today.